Good afternoon. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We are happy to have you here. Thank you very much for coming to attend this very important event, which is entitled, Is Turkey Complying with the Council of Europe Obligation? More we will develop during the event. And I'm delighted to present our host, Mr. Frédéric Mathieu, the French Member of Parliament and the Member of Parliamentary Assembly, Committee of Legal Affairs and Human Rights. At the French National Assembly, Mr. Mathieu is the co-chairman of the Kurdish Study Group. He is particularly involved in issues related to democracy and the rule of law in Turkey. Mr. Mathieu, thank you very much for hosting this event and being here with us today. And I'm absolutely delighted and very proud to see towards our next speakers. And I'm happy to present Mrs. Pinar Selek. Arrested in 1998 for her research on peace processes on demilitarization, she was imprisoned until her provisional release in 2000. For almost 24 years, Mrs. Pinar Selek has been subjected to judicial harassment by the Turkish authorities, abuse of the Interpol mechanisms, and abuses of the Interpol mechanisms is something that we need to discuss towards all illegal things that are happening in Turkey now, and other forms of political persecution, including transnational repression. I'm happy to see Hishar Ursoy, former PACE member, Deputy Chair or HDP, who will tell more about the case of renewed Kurdish lawyer, former co-chairman of HDP, Selahattin Demirtas, imprisoned on 4 November 2016 and charged with terrorism, amongst the other charges. I'm coming here from Belgium, and I'm absolutely delighted, and I'm proud to welcome here Professor Johan van de Lannotte, who is an emeritus professor of constitutional law and an administrator with a wealth of experience and expertise. He is the author of the Report of Crimes Against Humanity under the Rome Statute in Turkey today. Dear speakers, dear participants, thank you for coming, and I announce this event opened. And I'm delighted to give the floor to Mrs. Pinar Selek for her introductory remarks. What about you?
I shall speak in French, so you can listen to the interpreter. We have simultaneous interpreting. Ladies and gentlemen, you are welcoming me, you are welcoming us in a very dark period where barbarity, weapons, cruelty dominate our world. Therefore, it is also despair that dominates. The powerful make their laws, shedding blood, destroying populations, civilizations, and lives. And international institutions supposed to create political mechanisms allowing the democratic definition of public problems and their solutions are facing problems. This is the case with the Council of Europe created after the two world wars around the aspiration Never Again, which works to ensure that democratic values and basic rights prevail over geostrategic interests. It is resistance we're talking about. Resistance to defend international conventions, even if they are currently crushed under the boots of the balance of power, in a context where everything is played out at the geopolitical level, insisting on institutional frameworks and legal standards approved by consensus is a form of resistance. Resistance of democracy. This resistance to barbarianism forces you to push this interstate organization beyond its limits. Is it doable? Is it still possible to get populations to adhere to democratic mechanisms? With what measures? I'm aware of the heavy responsibilities that weigh on your shoulders. And you are thinking about different areas of urgent action to put an end to barbarianism, and you're welcoming me, you're welcoming us. Thank you so much to those of you who initiated this meeting. This goes to show that there is an awareness of the strong tie between our fight for justice in Turkey and the problems in our countries. Indeed, all these current problems have a link or are linked to the new transnational alliances of which Turkey is a part of. And making human rights violations and legal crimes visible contributes to your resistance to current barbarianisms. Here, I will not take time to summarize the long political and judicial harassment that began against me more than 25 years ago. I shall just summarize the last stage by clarifying first that my Kafkaian trial began before the current government in Turkey. This shows the historic nature and permanence of democratic problems in this country. It all started in a period when legal frameworks were less favorable to respecting rights, less so than today. This framework has evolved today, but my trial continues. It was in 1998 that I was arrested and I was tortured for unveiling the identity of Kurdish activists whom I had interviewed with as part of my sociological inquiry. Then I learned in prison, on television, that I was falsely accused of terrorism. I resisted thanks to enormous solidarity, but above all, a meticulous legal struggle. Independent investigations have shown that there were never an attack at the Istanbul spices market, but the explosion of a gas cylinder. I was acquitted 4 times because the case file was empty, and it still is empty. So every time a court looked at the merits of my case, it admitted that there were absolutely no evidence against me, and I was acquitted all the time. And it appears very clearly now that in Turkey, a fight for justice can succeed. Having said that, in December 2022, the Supreme Court overruled my last acquittal dating 2014. After 8 years, requesting my sentence to life imprisonment. On the 29th of September 2023, in Istanbul, the second hearing of the 5th trial took place. Faced with much international and local support, the Istanbul Criminal Court once again postponed the examination of my file until the 28th of June 2024. renewing its request for extradition against me and an international arrest warrant. This relentlessness amounts to harassment or psychological torture, but it is also one of the most extreme forms of attack against freedom of expression and academic freedom threatened today throughout the world. Since the beginning, I have refused to be conditioned by this relentlessness, and I try to expand my space of freedom and continue to think, to investigate, to analyze, and to write as freely as possible. And this was made possible thanks to the constant solidarity of countless people from multiple backgrounds, especially in France, of which I became a citizen. Having said that, as the French Minister for Europe and Foreign Affairs Minister in France, this relentlessness is a big problem for my work today, and I quote what she said. France, committed to freedom of research, provides its full support to the sociologist Pinar Selek, recognized innocent as an innocent on several occasions by the Turkish courts of the facts of which she has been accused. The legal proceedings to which she is subject in Turkey and the risk of arrest hinders her work. So yes, this legal process hinders my work. While I carry out multiple research on multidimensional situations across the borders in Europe, the international arrest warrant prevents me from leaving the French territory and freely exercising my job. Therefore, I cannot even cross the Franco-Italian border, although I am coordinator of the Migration Observatory in the French-Italian border. And I also cannot respond to many academic invitations received from different European countries. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to continue living as a researcher, thinker, and free writer in Europe. But the question is the following. Is it possible in Europe? And more precisely, can the Council of Europe make its contribution to safeguarding my freedom of research? Thank you for everything that you have done, and despite the darkness of our times, your commitment is moving the lines. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Pinar, et bon courage.
Thank you so much, Pinar, and much courage to you.
Philip Leach, Professor of Human Rights at Middlesex University, London. He is the legal representative of Osman Kavala, the renewed Turkish philanthropist and political prisoner of the Turkish regime. Everyone knows that on Monday, 9 October, the Parliamentary Assembly of Council of Europe awarded Osman Kavala with the Václav Havel Human Rights Prize. Mr. Leach is on Zoom with us. Good afternoon, Mr. Leach. Thank you very much for joining us. We are hearing you.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Can I check that you can hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you, we can see you. Thank you very much again for being here.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you for the invitation to talk about Mr. Kavala's case. You will know that the circumstances of his criminal prosecution have been very thoroughly reviewed by the European Court of Human Rights. The proceedings that led to his conviction and sentence to life imprisonment. Those proceedings have been exhaustively reviewed by the European Court of Human Rights, which has looked at all the case documents. It has heard extensively from the Turkish government. And in the light of all that, in 2019, it made a series of findings about the criminal proceedings against Osman Kavala. It found that there was no reasonable suspicion, even to arrest Mr. Kavala, let alone to bring criminal proceedings. It went on to find that the Turkish authorities had in fact pursued an ulterior purpose of aiming to silence him as a human rights defender and activist. And the court ordered his immediate release, something that the court very rarely does. That decision, that order from the court, the judgment from the European Court of Human Rights, was of course legally binding on Turkey, both under the European Convention on Human Rights and under the Turkish constitution. However, the decision has been ignored by the Turkish courts, and instead in April 2022, he was convicted of attempting to overthrow the government. There was then a second, an unprecedented judgment, Grand Chamber judgment from the European Court of Human Rights in 2022 on using the infringement proceedings process, which found that by failing to release Mr. Kavala, Turkey had failed to comply with that 2019 judgment and therefore was in breach of Article 46 of the European Convention on Human Rights. But that decision was also ignored by the Turkish courts, and instead his life sentence imprisonment was confirmed by the Court of Cassation just last month, and that decision is now final. We should, of course, make no mistake that the situation is absolutely crystal clear. Turkey has failed to comply with its binding legal obligation since 2019 to release Mr. Kavala. We're in a completely unprecedented situation for the Council of Europe, where an infringement proceedings judgment of the European Court is still being ignored and flouted by a member state of the Council of Europe. Remember that infringement proceedings has only ever been used in two cases, and in the other case, it was complied with. The efforts of the Committee of Ministers in this case, representing the other, well, formerly 46, more recently the other 45 member states of the Council of Europe, which have included 15 decisions and 3 interim resolutions, have as yet proved fruitless in terms of securing Mr. Kavala's release. So what can be done now? Well, the resolution today of the Committee on Legal Affairs and Human Rights, I think, is a significant moment. It makes a series of important proposals and recommendations. It recognises Mr. Kavala as a political prisoner, not least because of the European Court's finding of the authorities of pursuing ulterior purposes and a breach of Article 18 of the European Convention. The resolution also says that it's time to initiate the complementary joint procedure. This is another procedure, it's never been used, which involves the Parliamentary Assembly working together with the Committee of Ministers and the Secretary General of the Council of Europe to enter into high-level dialogue initially. It's a procedure that could lead to other measures such as suspension or even expulsion. The resolution also calls on Council of Europe states and the EU to introduce Magnitsky sanctions in relation to those who've been involved in Osman Kavala's case, police officers, prosecutors and judges and other officials. And it also calls on the EU to take this case into account when considering and reviewing its financial support to Turkey. Finally, to mention that the resolution also notes that the credentials of the Turkish delegation to PACE can be challenged. So the situation, it's of course a deeply personal tragedy for Mr. Kavala, the recipient of the Václav Havel Award this week, who has now been wrongfully imprisoned for 6 years. But it also represents a serious political and constitutional challenge to the Council of Europe and raises the significant question of what can and should be done when a state ignores and flouts European Court judgments. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Leach, for your precious inputs. They were very important to be heard today. And I'm giving the floor to Hishar. Hishar Ursoy will tell us about Selahattin Demirtas.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. So nice to see so many people actually interested in questions of democracy in this council. I want to be cynical a little bit about this because my experience here, 8 years, and I'm no longer an active member of the PACE, unfortunately has been that geopolitical considerations are also trumping human rights and democracy, even in the Council of Europe, a place which normally should have nothing to do with geopolitical considerations. This is a council which was established after the Second World War, after so many tragedies, to establish and promote sustainable democratic structures and institutions and the rule of law and human rights. Maybe I should say this at the very end of my speech, but let me say it at the very outset. It has been 4 years now that a member state, despite all recommendations, warnings, beggings, is simply saying that we don't care about what you think. It is as clear as that, crystal clear. The problem is not really what Turkey is going to do. The position of Turkey, the Turkish government, has been absolutely clear, very clear. They don't care. But the problem of this council is not clear. It's Committee of Ministers, I would say partly maybe Parliamentary Assembly. We have heard that the Committee of Ministers is actually playing ball to not to do anything with respect to Kavala's case, despite the clear decision of the Grand Chamber that this is a violation of Article 46, which means that Turkey is not abiding by the rules. It is as simple as that. So, and at the end I will come to what we can do, actually what this council can do. But let me just remind you a couple of things. I have served as the deputy chair of People's Democratic Party. Still, actually, I am the deputy chair in charge of foreign affairs. It has been 8 years now. And we have a closure case against the HDP. And sometime very soon, myself and a lot of my friends, all the leaders in the HDP, which is the third biggest party in Turkey, we may be politically banned for 5 years, and our party is shut down. And we have been having all kinds of strange accusations. Our co-chairs, former co-chairs, Mr. Selahattin Demirtas and Yüksek Dağ, still in prison, despite decisions, judgments of the Grand Chamber of the European Court of Human Rights, also invoking Article 18, like in the case of Osman Kavala, which is that these prosecutions are all politically motivated. They have an ulterior purpose of stifling pluralism in the country. Everything is clear. Everybody knows about that. I won't go into details. Over 150 mayors elected by Kurdish people were sent to prisons. Over 30 of them are still in prisons. And so far, the Congress of Local and Regional Authorities here could do nothing about this, other than issuing some reports here and there. And now we are going to have some local elections next March, right? Since 2016, over 100 Kurdish cities and towns, and by cities I mean actually big cities, one which I represented, Diyarbakir, 2 million people, we elect a mayor, sent to prison, we elect another mayor, sent to prison, still they are in prison. Yeah? The town that I represent. And here we talk about democracy and human rights, while it's very clear that the institutions here are also failing, really, to keep their promises for this or that reason. We have thousands of people in prison still. a lot of administrators of my party. Many of you are already following the situation. But let me tell you this. I mean, I won't go into details. I mean, if I go into details, I will list. I can list like hundreds of cases here and there. And this is not just about the Kurds, I should say. Anybody critical of the government and anybody has the courage to challenge the government, actually, is a terrorist. Clear. I don't want to talk about personal anecdotes, but let me give you an example. The last time I was in a violent situation, fight, was high school. We were playing soccer, and we had a fight. That was my last fist fighting. It's normal. Like, since then, I haven't involved in even a fist fighting. So I was at the prestigious university in Turkey studying sociology. I went to the States, studied anthropology, master's, doctoral work. I became a professor of anthropology, 15 years, 20 years outside Turkey. Then I go back to Turkey in 2015 upon the invitation of Demirtas and the leadership of HDP. In 6 months, I became a terrorist. Only 6 months. Didn't involve in any fight, even fist fighting. But I expressed my ideas about a peaceful resolution of the Kurdish conflict. And now I think I have 13 or 15 cases against me, simply because as a member of parliament who is supposed to have parliamentary immunity, said this or said that. That is the accusation, really. I was even sentenced for insulting our president. He is so sensitive, you know. There are tens of thousands of cases just about insulting the president. And my statement was that we are like, 80 million people, we haven't been able to satisfy the desires of our president. This much. How dare you say we haven't been able to satisfy President Erdogan? I was sentenced to 11 years and 20 something, 11 months and 20 days, something. So to put aside my personal situation, I'm doing quite well. A lot of friends of mine, Felek Nas, which I was here, she was given the honorary membership. I think she has like over 80 court cases against her. She's a very, talented Yazidi Kurdish politician who also served at the European Parliament for 10 years. But she goes to Turkey, 8 years, 80 cases against her. So to conclude, we are here talking about how the anti-terror law in Turkey is being instrumentalized to target opposition, right? Let me put it very bluntly. Some of you know me. I have been quite diplomatic in a lot of my conversations. I have to be. I represented the HDP. I was foreign affairs advisor, foreign affairs person. But today I want to talk not diplomatically, but very bluntly. No politicking. The Turkish government is using the judiciary to terrorize a whole population, the whole Turkish population. I mean, if you ask me, what is terrorism? Terrorism is the use of force for political purposes, right? And if you count like prisons, the police, and all those institutions of repression and oppression, are what they call security, but these are what we call repressive state apparatus, right? To quote some phrase from Althusser, the French philosopher. They are using the law and the police and other institutions to terrorize the population. And by this, I mean people are scared to express their ideas. This is terrorism. So the anti-terror law in Turkey, as the way it has been implemented, is to terrorize the whole democratic opposition in Turkey, including the Kurds, but others as well. So what can be done here? I think everybody knows what happened in Turkey. I see here, for example, very dear friends, like Sylvie is here. She has been writing reports on Turkey for so many years. I am sure she's tired. She knows much better than me. I know our rapporteur is here. Many other friends who are interested in questions of democracy and human rights in Turkey. Everybody knows what is happening there. The thing that we don't know is what, as a council, because we are having this debate here at the Council of Europe, what this Council of Europe can do with respect to this constant deterioration of human rights and democracy in Turkey. It is not just about Osman Kavala. As a person, we all know him. I know him also as a decent person, a philanthropist, promoting civil society. You may disagree with even his politics, but aggravated life sentence for him? Really? Yeah? I mean, it is unimaginable, really. And people are now thinking like this. If this happens to a person like Osman Kavala, what may happen to others? Can you imagine that? How do you expect people even talk, express their ideas in Turkey? So I think it's high time to really give a serious warning. If Turkey wants to remain as a member of these institutions, the Council of Europe, the government should be reminded that there are rules to be followed. It is up to the Turkish government, it is not up to the Council, if they want to maintain their status here as a respected member, respecting human rights and democracy, then they need to abide by the rules. To conclude my last speech, I'm sorry I'm taking a bit more time than others, I'm sorry for that. At one point, Mr. Jagland, you would remember, he invited me to his room, our former Secretary General of the Council of Europe. I told him, he actually saw one of my interviews with, I don't know, it was Financial Times, maybe I was quoted, and I, just to provoke a debate, actually, I was quoted saying, sometimes I feel that a golf club is more serious than the Council of Europe. And so the Secretary General actually, he was hooked. So he saw that and he invited me for a conversation. So we had a conversation with Mr. Jagland before he left. He said, what do you mean by this, really? I mean, as a member of the Council of Europe's Parliamentary Assembly. I said, I was trying to be provocative and to attract the attention of some leaders of the Council. He said, you were successful. Yeah, I said, you invited me. So my argument was this, even when you are a member of a golf club, you see, there are certain rules. You pay your fees, there is some particular attire, some clothing, and some rules. The moment you don't follow the rules, you know what they do to you? Even a golf club, you are out. You are out. So I think it is time for the Council to think about its enforcement power. If the Council is not able to make member states implement the judgments of the European Court of Human Rights, then I think the rest would be empty talk here. Let me stop here, and I would be happy to answer if you have any questions.
Thank you, Kishore. Thank you very much. And for me personally, as a lawyer, it's delicious to hear an opinion precisely what we can do on the law level, on the level of judiciary. And here I'm giving the floor to Mr. Van de Lannotte, Professor Van de Lannotte.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. Welcome, everybody. I was together with my colleague, lawyer, in the Yalcinkaya case, which has been decided 26th of September this year, which is a groundbreaking judgment, you can say, with a lot of very basic principles. And as a lawyer, then you should be happy that you get such a judgment. I'm not happy at all, because the context does not give me reason to be happy with it. And what's the context? It has already been mentioned here, the jurisdictional. I'm talking as a lawyer more. I have been in politics a long time, but today I'm talking as a lawyer. This case is very specific. This situation is very specific, and as colleague Philip Leach said, it is unprecedented for the Council. We are in an unprecedented situation. You have two decisions of the European Court in the Kavala case. But not only decisions, but also decisions on the fact that they do not execute the infringement procedure. As has been explained, the only time that the court had to go that far and still without result. After, I think, 15 times at the Committee of Ministers, 3 times resolutions, and I don't know, in the group of the Emeritus, different, how many times they already have been meeting, I do not count, and it is, and anyhow, the number is extremely high. In the Emeritus group, also Grand Chamber, also Article 18 the will to silence opponents, not the will to make respect the human rights or to the democracy, the rule of law, but the will, the aim of silencing people had been expressed clearly by the Grand Chamber of the European Court of Human Rights. Third one, we didn't talk about that, and it's a bit amazing perhaps, but when there is a decision of the European Court in any country, that there is a judge, and this judge has been dismissed in violation of the European standards, that's a real blame for that country when it happens. In Turkey, we have, I think, 9, 10, 11 judgments, exactly, for hundreds of judges who have been dismissed in clear violation of the European Convention, judges and prosecutors. And where this decision has become a routine. Look at these decisions. They have decided one, and now, poof, they put 50 people in it, short reasoning, we all know what happened, violation. It is becoming a routine. That's the context we're living in. That's the context we're living in. And I go to the Yasin Kaya case, where it was a conviction, and there is a clear link to the other files, conviction based on the mere use of communication application and a membership of a civil society organization and a union. Guilt by association, which basically was the same also in Kavala and in the Demirtas and other cases, with some differences, but the basic element is you do not need to prove one person's guilt, but you associate him with something, even if it is not true, and he's guilty. The use of some elements, the speech, of the talking, to be membership for this or that, whatever, having contacts with the European ambassador, for instance, in the Kavala case, is enough. And when I read it in this judgment, the expansive interpretation of terrorist law, what you called the instrumentalization of terrorist law, no individualized finding, an automatic approach, I'm just citing, the interpretation seems to presuppose the very conclusions to which it purports to lead. An almost automatic presumption of guilt, I'm citing, a uniform approach. And perhaps the last one, a rule of law state, judges do not have a uniform approach. Uniforms are for policemen or for the army. A uniform is not for the judge. The judge has in criminal law to decide individually. If he does not do that anymore, there is no rule of law. So the conclusion of the court was very clear. The conclusion was, it is a systemic problem. It is a systemic violation, and I pull the attention to the people here, systemic. That's want to say that the state as such is in breach with its essential obligations. It is affecting a large number of persons. There are, for the moment, similar 8,000 cases pending before the court. 8,000. We all know that about 1/3 of all the cases coming from Turkey, and let's say that a lot of people, because they don't see what is the use of doing it, still are yet not coming. And I cite, the court is therefore of the opinion that in order to avoid it having to establish similar violations in numerous cases in the future, the defects identified in the present judgment need to be addressed by the Turkish authorities on a larger scale, that is beyond the specific case of the present applicant. So structural, general measures are needed. Now, what can we do? What can we do? As I said, I was not happy with the judgment. I was happy with the judgment as such, but what will it help? And we know what happened to the Demirtas and to the Kavala and other cases. So there are two elements that I want to emphasize. The first is the one that Hishar was explaining, of course. The Council of Europe is before an unprecedented situation now, that it is has a membership that clearly, openly refuses, not saying that they execute it, because already now with the Yeltsin-Kai, they said, we will not execute it. Don't have hope, they said. We will not execute it. Firmly, clearly. An organization that does not respect its own rules is not respected. It's simple. Respect comes by making your own rules about human rights violations, which are very important, of course, should be respected. I know that the sanction, that when a country is dismissed, is kicked out, the sanction is a failure as such. But not doing anything at all at that stage would make your council completely inoperative. Secondly, I read in the proposal of resolution that a call to apply Magnitsky legislation. I strongly, strongly support that. We have the classical legal remedies have failed. You have to take other remedies. And you have to apply them to those who are responsible for it. In my opinion, if I see all these cases, it was before the council, the High Council, now it's only the council, I don't know why. It's illustrative. The Council for Judges and Prosecutors are the one who are installing a hierarchical system in the judiciary in Turkey. Hierarchy and judiciary does not go together. We saw it also in the Kavala case. 3 judges decide, okay, we have to set him free. Day after, start of a procedure disciplinary. And we saw it in all the cases that we have been doing until now. This is a hierarchical situation. Those people who maintain are the first one, you have to go with the Magnitsky legislation. You have the judges of the Constitutional Court who have a very specific responsibility. If the High Council, the Council of Judges and Prosecutors, and the Constitutional Court are put on the Magnitsky legislation, you could change something. And that is something that you can do, that Europe can do, that the countries can do. Because people always say, what can we do? You can do that. And our experience is that it helps. So that's my question, my demand, not only an advice, your own respect, and apply this Magnitsky legislation, and it could be that change finally could come. Thank you.
And we cannot agree more. And, well, I think Professor triggered our desire to open the question and answer section. And I was announced that we have with us Mrs. Hanna Lucinda Smith, a correspondent from Economist Turkey. She is on Zoom. Hanna, can you hear us? Are you with us?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. You are welcome in this room, and we opened question and answers section.
Thank you. Can I ask one question to start off?
Yes, we are waiting for your question.
Thank you. At this point, what do you think the likelihood is of Turkey being expelled from the Council of Europe?
That's a blunt question. I think that a lot of countries are hesitating, a lot of representatives are hesitating, because the sanction, of course, is also something that is, how they call, to bite in your own tail. Someone who is suspended or finally expelled from the council has an excuse not to respect anything at all anymore. So I'm not so optimistic that it will easily go, because that will be the excuse. The excuse will be that the sanction is worse than the harm done. But I think you cannot say, it's simple, you cannot continue when willingly someone does not want to respect the rules, to say, okay, that's a pity, and we will make a resolution. But yeah, that's the way it goes. You cannot. So for the Council of Europe, I cannot answer your question because that's looking in the future, which I cannot. And I think it is not very likely to happen, but if it doesn't happen and the non-execution stays, the Council has lost its power, if it has, and other countries will follow. The other ones will follow. That's for sure.
And we have an answer from Frederic, the member of Parliamentary Assembly of Council of Europe and the organizer of this side event. The floor is yours.
Oui, merci. Alors bien entendu, je vais donner...
Thank you so much. I will only provide my personal opinion, of course. I'm sorry I'm speaking French now, but can you hear the interpreter? Thank you so much. Thank you. Personally, I'm very attached, like everybody else here, but some people more than others. I'm asking myself questions as regards the Turkish government. I believe that at a moment in time, you need to devise political acts. There are many crises in the world, accumulation of crises, and they have an impact on human rights. We see that with the increased neo-fascism in Europe and in the world. But at a moment in time, you have to take political action. We cannot let human rights and the ECHR being flouted by the denial of the Turkish government, because we are in a situation of denial. The Turkish government is saying that everything is fine, but everything is not fine. Everything is bad, and Turkey is mocking its partners. Isia talked about many people he could name, of course, but we can also name Pinar Selek, who is with us today. She's part and parcel of the people who was persecuted by the government in place. But we could speak about Abdullah Öcalan, who is in a black hole, in a prison black hole. Turkey has abolished the death penalty, but is actually experiencing death on a daily basis. He cannot see daylight. He cannot speak, otherwise he's punished. He's prevented from sleeping. He's submitted to inhuman and degrading treatments. So until March 2021, or since March 2021, we haven't had any news from Öcalan. So at a moment in time, if Turkey wants to stop mocking its partners will have to take very hard sanctions, all the way to expulsions. Thank you.
We are listening for the question. If you have dear guests. Yes. Can you introduce yourself, please, and your question?
Thank you. So, hello, everyone. I am Fatima Suleymanova, a member of the Chechen National Liberation Movement United Force. I would like to express my opinion. Today, the world is globalized and interconnected. Because of impunity, Russia acts as if everything is permitted, and it sets a bad example for neighboring countries. The situation in Turkey is no worse than the situation in Russia, but for some reason the Russian situation was kept silent for a long time, and even after...
Fatima, I'm sorry, do you have a question? Because we are restrained in time.
Yes,
do you have a question, please?
So I will just finish my... the Russian situation was kept silent for a long time, and even after the war in Ukraine, Russia is not deprived of its United Nations Security Council membership. The fact that Russia has been deprived of its membership here is good, but it's more specific. But more specific measures.
Dear Fatima, I'm sorry. I need to remind you. Just conclude your question.
The last sentence. If it's done, if this is done, Turkey will not avoid the common rules. Thank you.
That was not a question, as well as I understand. We have two questions.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for wonderful event. My name is Ludmila Kozlovska. I represent Open Dialogue Foundation. My question is how are we going to defend those who are actually coming here to the Parliament Assembly of Council of Europe and say about all these human rights violations if afterwards Turkish delegation is capable to basically ask other members of the delegations to attack civil society and asks, for example, Secretariat not to invite civil society to the premises there, or, for example, to cancel their side events, or, for example, to cancel the items in relevant institutions like even INGO. So it's an international conference of NGOs to Council of Europe. How are we going to address it? Do we have effective instruments? And what do you think about it? Thank you.
Well, Hishar, your experience as a member of PACE for a long time, it's valuable.
But the question was not very clear to me. That
how we can protect those who are fighting for human rights but are interrupted or intimidated by the Turkish official delegation, because lawyers and NGO, we have a secondary role here, not the primary.
I see. I mean, first of all, so far we haven't been able to protect who are there on the ground, actually, who are in prison still. I mean, we haven't been able to protect them. And now the question is, of course, those who are involved in protecting those who are already in prison is going to make it even more difficult. So, I mean, I think we need some real structural change in the country. I mean, this is like Kavala's situation. He's one person. Demirtas is one person. We are talking about tens of millions of people who are scared to talk even. Here they are not allowed to, I think they were not allowed to enter the premises, you said?
Exactly, it's us. I mean, we invited Academia, who was basically the person who represented
I see what you mean. No, I see. I don't know what kind of an excuse. Where is it? Okay. What kind of an excuse they do sometimes, but I know that recently there has been a lot of micromanaging, I should say. Which is happening at this council. I'm personally not happy about that. I think the rule is like you need to send information in advance a week and blah, blah, at least that is what, at one point it happened to us, but I think there is a debate somebody should make with the kind of Secretary General. I mean, it is not, of course, the members, but, you know, NGOs should be, NGOs, journalists and regular citizens should be allowed to have full access to this as long as they do not pose an actual security threat. And you don't look like a person that can pose a security threat to me, with all due respect, but that is something, we have been having that actually. I think, like, they should be more open, the council in general.
Thank you, Hishar. And Ludmila, we have two more questions. Yavuz, okay, Mr. Yes. And then Yavuz, our colleague.
Here we are. My name's Jack Hanning. I'm the Secretary General of the Association of Schools of Political Studies of the Council of Europe, which was founded by Osman Kavala. Which is not the only reason, but one of the reasons why I'm interested in what's going on at the moment. But I'm actually much more interested in the whole spectrum of things that you've been talking about. I wanted to put a question, I think, probably to Frédéric Mathieu. He would be the best person to answer. There is this new system of the Assembly working with the Secretary General and the Committee of Ministers. Which, if you remember, was actually introduced under the pressure of the Russians when they wanted to come back to the Council of Europe, and in many ways emasculated the Parliamentary Assembly, which used to have the possibility of suspending voting rights, and it no longer does. But what I wanted to ask was, what do you expect to get out of this new system? And don't you think it's going to take a very, very long time for it to get anywhere? Thank you.
Oui, merci pour.
Thank you very much for your question, sir. Yes, indeed. It's likely to be a very long haul. It will probably take a very long time to achieve, I don't know, expulsion, for example, because when we speak of expelling Turkey, what are we speaking of here? We're speaking about power relations. And we can only but say today that Turkey has decided to weigh in with all of its power to circumvent its obligations. And I will speak quite freely regarding this new joint mechanism. Well, personally speaking, I don't think it's a particularly good one or a particularly efficient one, and we are speaking within an international organization, of course, that has a parliamentary assembly, and I think that nothing can replace the sovereign authority of a parliament, be it here within the Council of Europe or in France. It's a cause that I also champion in France.
Turkish judge and board member of Justice for Rule of Law, based in Belgium. Regarding the report on the implementation of the ECHR judgment on Osman Kavala, which will be voted today in the Assembly, I saw the dissenting opinion of the member of Turkish delegation, Ms. Zeynep Yıldız, and in her dissenting opinion, I quote, she says, it gives the false impression that Turkish courts willingly and systematically ignore the decision of the Strasbourg court and that the official figures suggest otherwise. And according to her, Turkey's compliance rate with the judgments of the European Court of Human Rights is 89%, well above the average of 79% of all the Council of Europe member states. So, having dealt with human rights trainings and the implementation of the EU acquis and ECHR judgments in Turkey, I know the situation is not like this, that these figures do not reflect the reality. So, for what I know in terms of evaluating the coherence with the ECHR case law is measured with the coherence in leading judgments of the ECHR and the complex cases and systemic and structural problems. So I know that there are, Turkey is the champion in the whole Council of Europe in these terms, in terms of not implementing such cases. So, as the maybe Mr.
Professor
Lawyer of Yalçınkaya case, which just set forth that there's this Article 7 breach in Turkey, would you be able to assess these figures? What would you say?
Everyone who contradicts the president is in Turkey considered to be a terrorist, so the lady will probably be considered as a terrorist from now on. Because what she said contradicts clearly the president. The president said, we will not execute. They should not have hope, he said, that we will respect that. He's clearly said it himself. So who am I? I only, by organizing the Turkey tribunal, we already considered as terrorists before we said something. So the lady is in danger. Now, first of all, it is the only country where the Article 46.3, as Professor Leach explained, the infringement procedure is the only time. That's also why we saw at the turning point for the Council. It's the first time it happens. No other country had it. So if you say Turkey is willingly not to execute, that's what the court say. That's even not what we said, that's the court say. They say they used a legal system to silence opponents, first of all. And secondly, because that's a very unexpected impact, sorry to be cynical, but if at a certain moment Turkey leaves the Council of Europe, the Court of European Court of Human Rights will have plenty of time, because I think around 1/3 of the cases coming in, or Turkish cases, I think more than 24,000, something like that. So, en français, on dit, ce n'est que le ridicule qui tue, je pense. C'est qu'on dit. It's only when you're ridiculous that you're killing someone. This is very ridiculous to say.
Nicholas Bell, I've accompanied Panasilek here for her visit to the Council of Europe, and I'm in the support solidarity groups with Panasilek in France. I just want to come back to things that she mentioned in her speech, particularly concerning her own situation at the moment, which is that despite the fact that she has complete and total support in France, she is a French, has French nationality. As she said, the foreign minister has completely supported her. But at the moment, she is in the situation that she cannot travel outside France to any country, including Belgium, for example, including Germany, because there is an arrest warrant for her, and she cannot be sure what will happen. Her own lawyers tell her that she should be careful. So the question basically is, what can the Council of Europe? We have come here basically to call on individual members of the Parliamentary Assembly from countries like Switzerland, Belgium, Italy, all other countries, to make a call on their respective governments to make a clear declaration that Panasilek will never be extradited back to Turkey. If there is a clear declaration coming from these countries, then she can travel to them at the moment. But the question, so I call on all members here to try to do what they can in that sense. But I would also like to ask, in view of the fact that this is a breach of her academic freedom and her right to mobility in France, is there anything that the Council of Europe, with its different conventions and so on, can actually undertake in this field? I'm sure she's not the only person who has faced this. So, yeah.
Thank you, Nick. Professor Rons, and then I think Mr. Mathieu as well. Yeah, Professor Alesi.
Yes, you have your question about the Council of Europe, but you also have the question of the states. Si je vais répondre en français, comme ça vous pouvez le mieux.
Perhaps I will reply in French. Yes, we have dealt with similar cases. And there are a number of people who live in Belgium, for example, and who are subject to arrest warrant. And our system, where we have a mechanism that makes it possible to contact Belgian judicial officials, because clearly these are cases of abuse. In England, for example, a decision was taken regarding a person who was due to be extradited to Turkey. The authorities refused. They said, no, this is an abuse or misuse of relevant legislation. Now, Mr. Mathieu might say something more about this, but there are certainly possibilities. So perhaps we will contact her to at least to make it possible for her to travel to Belgium. I think Frédéric would like to say a few words. Yes, very quickly. I know that we're running out of time. We all have other commitments. It has already been stated, but perhaps not enough. Panasilek is a citizen of the French Republic. So the obvious consequences are that if she, as a French citizen, is not allowed to move about freely within Europe, it is incumbent on the French government to ensure that she can do so. So I will call upon my government and various committees. I think that's really the first step that should be taken to ask the French government what are they doing to ensure that their citizen, Mrs. Selek, is free to travel, to move from one country to another, and if France does nothing, they will infringe the European Convention on Human Rights.
For concluding remarks, as a response to previous questions.
Yeah, just to clarify, I know the argument of the government is that Turkey is doing like 80% of the judgments are being implemented. So the trick here is, by implementation, oftentimes they mean getting some 5,000 euros tax money and giving to some other person, right? Because of the failure of their judicial system, They don't punish the police. They don't punish the judges. They just get our tax money and they give it to the person and they call this is compensated. But the case of Demirtas, Kavala, these are very symbolic. One is about the political society in Turkey, the other is about the civil society in Turkey. And these are cases that relate to the fundamentals of human rights, democracy, and the rule of law. It is all about the Council of Europe, right? That's the only reason why this council exists. So they should not be confusing these two. Plus, the Council of Europe, the court decisions are not just, I pick this one. You are not picking apples or oranges from a grocery store. I mean, you can't say, I implement this one and I don't implement the other one. Plus, the Turkish constitution has included the article that the judgments of the European Court of Human Rights are above the Turkish law. That is the other thing. I mean, now the government is acting against the constitution. The government should be prosecuted for violating the constitution itself. It's a very bizarre, ridiculous situation. So that argument that 89% of the things is mainly like using our tax money to pay for the failures of the judicial system. It is totally not serious, really. Don't take it seriously. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much, Mr. Mathieu. Without you, we couldn't organize it. Thank you very much. Pinar and courage for your bravery and for your example how to fight for democracy. Thank you very much, Professor. Thank you very much, Kishar, for your valuable inputs. Merci.